I'll try that again. All right, I'll call council to order for our special council meeting at 6 o'clock. And the first item in front of us is a declaration of pecuniary interest. Does any member have a pecuniary interest in tonight's session? Seeing none at this time, you find yourself in that spot, let us know. Next is, it's moved by the Deputy Mayor, second by Councillor Saunders, that the agenda of the regular council meeting of September 27, 2017 be approved as presented. Any comments or questions on that? I do have one. I'm uncomfortable with going in camera on the service delivery review. I don't see the need for that. It's just the consultant's report on his finding. We're not making decisions, so I'm wrestling with that. Maybe staff can help me. Oh, sorry.
This is the first motion on the special council.
Oh, thank you. So I need a mover and seconder to go into camera. I'll read this again. Thank you, Doug. Seconder, Debbie. Thank you. So it's moved that in accordance with the Town of Penetanguishene Procedure Bylaw 2016-08, the Council of the Town of Penetanguishene move into in-camera session to discuss a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality or local board. It's items 3 and 4. Labor relations, item or employee negotiations, items number 4. And litigation or potential litigations, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality or board, which is item number 2. And as I previously mentioned, I'm really wrestling with the service delivery. We're not being asked to make any decisions, deliberations, or considerations. So we've had a consultant come through town, said, here's what I found, sharing with council his findings. So I have trouble having somebody tell us their findings and not being in the public. I understand that the findings might unsettle some folks, but I looked at a lot of the activities done over the years, and not all reports make all members of council happy, citizens or staff, but I don't think we shirk receiving the report in public, so maybe staff can help me with that.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll kick it off, and then I'll ask our clerk to speak to specifically from a procedural perspective. Certainly in discussions with the service delivery review consultant, as well as several colleagues of mine, and knowing how other municipalities have handled similar matters from a labor relations perspective, and specifically that clause under the Act, as well as the identifiable individual clause, given that it does reference specific positions. It's not uncommon to go in camera for these type of instances. Specifically from a labor relations perspective, it does put a conversation out there that from my perspective, and certainly the perspective of many municipalities, should be done in camera and as well within the Act. Maybe I'll ask our clerk just to speak from a procedural perspective, because she also did some digging on this before we drafted up the agenda.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I'd just echo the comments of the CAO in terms of the reasons why the item was placed in camera. And I did speak to another local clerk just to get some advice to ensure that it would meet criteria. Obviously, it's the decision of all of council to make the decision of whether or not that item does remain in camera. But I'm a little concerned that if we do remove it, I think we've had this conversation before, that when we remove something from in camera and we bring it into open, we aren't really meeting that notice requirement, in the sense that the members of the public haven't seen that document, and so we're sort of bringing in a document, discussing it openly. But again, that is the decision of council.
Thank you. Just for clarity, though, so I think it's staff's perspective that we don't want to talk about this in open, because we might have a staff reaction that we're speculating the staff reaction will be poor. Because I don't see anything here where we're negotiating with staff. I get the situation that the recommendation coming from the consultant make people go, but just because we're anticipating a doesn't mean we should not be talking about it publicly. So I'm just wrestling with this. I understand we can go under the camera. What I'm wrestling with is should we, given the circumstance that this is not a negotiation or employee negotiations, it's a speculation that there might be a negative reaction to a document that the consultant presented to council for consideration. Jeff, please.
If I might, Your Worship, the only thing that I was remiss in commenting on is we do have a few collective agreements at play here with two two union groups, as well as a number of employee contractual agreements at play with some of the items that have been identified in the in-camera portion of the consultant's report. So that, again, just from a labor relations perspective, I would caution council on that.
Thank you for that. I think, any council, any other comments on tonight's agenda before I call for the vote on this? Councillor Saunders, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. I wonder if, because my memory's not what it once was, our staff would mind reading out the specifics of the in-camera legislation. Exactly when we're allowed to go into camera, and then we're in a better position to judge whether or not what is before us meets those criteria.
Through you, Your Worship, thank you, Councillor Saunders. I can certainly pull up the specific legislation. That would take me a minute to just pull that up, but I can tell you that the legislation speaks to council only going in camera, and it has to meet the criteria within the items listed in the Municipal Act, and it states specifically that the item needs to identify what the reason is, and they give you a list, and the list is what we use to read within the motion. And in this case, we identified item 6, I believe is what it is, which is the service delivery review emerging themes as the reason we're going into closed session as labor relations or employee negotiations. Thank you, Your Worship. Councillor Rawson, is it something you'd just like me to read aloud for everyone? Or sorry, Councillor Saunders. So it's specifically related to Section 239 of the Municipal Act. There's limited ability for councils, local boards, and their committees to hold closed meetings. The list of reasons is found in subsections 2, 3, 3.1 of Section 239 of the Municipal Act. They list the security and the property of the municipal local board, personnel matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees, a proposed or pending acquisition of disposition of land, municipality or local board, labor relations or employee negotiations, litigation or potential litigation, advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, consideration of a request under the Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act, a matter in respect of which a council, board, or committee or other body may hold a closed meeting under any other act, and education or training. These are the items that are permitted for which a closed meeting may be held. And it, in addition to whether to move into closed session, is discretionary. That is, the council, local board, or committee decides whether a closed meeting is required for that particular matter.
I wonder if we could hear specifically from our CAO in what way, under which one of those clauses, does the present issue fall?
Through your worship, the clauses that certainly we've identified in the in-camera agenda, as well as what other municipalities have utilized for very similar circumstances, are twofold. So the first one being, in no particular order, the labor relations or employee negotiations. Given that there is a section or a portion of the in-camera report that does talk about specific structures within the organization and some opportunities that Blackline have identified and essentially will be suggesting. And the second piece being personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees. And again, in discussions with other municipalities, despite it not identifying specific names, it does identify specific positions in the in-camera portion of the report, which again falls under this clause. The overarching umbrella that I would suggest is from a labor relations perspective, given that there is some conversations or some opportunities and recommendations that the consultant is suggesting that organizationally will have potential impacts to both collective agreements as well as the contractual obligations that the town of Penetanguishene as the employer has with essentially the organization and staff throughout.
Any other comments, questions before I call for the vote? Then all in favor of going in camera? Opposed? And that motion is carried, and we'll adjourn in camera at 6:14 p.m. Do you just want to stay in here, Jeff, or go in? Okay. Yeah. Okay. That's fine. I just wasn't sure if the that's the other one. Yeah, I just read it go. I mean, I remember when the consultants came into.
It was a very kind of situation, I guess. We got to find a new place to hold committee of the whole. Right here would be fine. Absolutely. That's embarrassing.
All righty, council, I'll call us back to order, and I need a mover and seconder for the following motion, that the council of the town of Penetanguishene rise from in-camera session with a report. Councillor Rawson, seconded by Councillor Lauder. And all in favor of that motion? And that is carried. And I need a mover and seconder for the following motion, that the council deem the property at mover and seconder that the council retain the lands at 132 Church Street, and that the owners of 126 Church Street be notified of council's decision. Mover and seconder for that, Councillor Rawson, Councillor LaRose. Final comments or questions from council? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor? That is carried. And I'll need a mover and seconder for the following motion, that council accept a land sale purchase offer in the amount of $62,250 for the town-owned land at 2 Robillard Drive, and that staff be directed to proceed with the land sale agreement with David Wright, and find that once all conditions of the land sale agreement are met, staff be directed to proceed with the necessary steps to finalize the land sale. Mover and seconder for that, please. Councillor Lauder, Councillor Leroux. Final comments, questions on this one? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor? And that is carried. Thank you very much. This is always interesting when we rise from in-camera questions from the media and public. I'm pretty sure there's not going to be any. Alrighty, announcements or inquiries? Any member of council have an announcement or inquiry tonight? Seeing that, we'll move on to a motion to adjourn, please. Councillor Rawson, Councillor Lauder, all in favor? We're adjourned at 7:02 p.m. And just give me a second to get this paperwork to Stacy, and we'll start council. Alrighty, I'll call council to order at 7:02 p.m. for our council meeting, and welcome our audience here tonight. Thank you for participating, and for those who are watching us on Rogers or live stream, thanks for following along as well. Council, if you can join me in the council commitment, please. We are grateful for the many gifts which have been bestowed on Penetanguishene and its citizens, including the gifts of freedom, opportunity, and peace that we enjoy. May we be worthy custodians of all that has been entrusted to us. We ask all in attendance and those who could not be here to assist us in promoting good government. May our decisions as members of council be enlightened, and may we all be strengthened in our awareness of our duties and responsibilities. May we be granted the wisdom, knowledge, will, and understanding to preserve the good fortune of the town for the benefit of all, and to make good laws and wise decisions. Thank you all for attending. Moving on to agenda item 3A, it's moved by the Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Saunders, that the agenda of the regular council meeting of September 27, 2017 be approved as presented. Any comments, questions on tonight's agenda? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. Then all in favor? And that agenda is approved. Item number 4, pecuniary interest. Does any member of council find themselves in pecuniary interest tonight? Seeing none at this time, if you find yourself in that position as we move along, let us know and we'll address it appropriately. Item number 5, moving to minutes, adoptions of minutes not already confirmed, moved by Councillor Saunders, seconded by the Deputy Mayor, that the following minutes be confirmed and adopted as circulated. Council, September 13, 2017. Committee of the Whole, September 13, 2017. Any comments, errors, or omissions noticed on those minutes? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor? And those are carried. These in the right order. This goes last. RCS. All right, we'll move on to presentations, consideration of reports from Committee of the Whole. It's moved by Councillor LaRue, seconded by Councillor Mayotte, that the recommendations contained within Committee of the Whole report related to Recreation and Community Services section be approved. Does anyone wish to pull any of these items for further discussion or debate? Seeing none, I'll call for vote. All in favor? And those are approved. Moving on to Planning and Development. Moved by Councillor Lauder, second by Councillor Levy, that the recommendations contained within the Committee of the Whole report related to Planning and Development Services section be approved. Does anyone wish to pull any of these items for discussion or debate? Seeing none, I'll call for vote. Then all in favor? And those are approved. Moving on to Transportation and Environmental Services, that the recommendations contained within, moved by Councillor Ross and second by Councillor LaRose, that the recommendations contained within Committee of the Whole report related to Transportation and Environmental Services section be approved. Does anyone wish to pull any of these items? Councillor LaRose, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I wonder if we could pull 5B2.
And that one was again, Councillor LaRose?
That was the Main Street contract for JB Enterprise.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll pull that one. Does anyone wish to pull any of the other items? Seeing none, then I'll call for the vote on balance. All in favor? And that is approved and carried. Councillor LaRose on 5B2, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. As Council recall, 2 weeks ago, we did the final on Main Street for our contract to go. And I was just wondering, I wanted to bring forth a small amendment to that tonight. And that would be concerning the section between Robert Street and Point Street as we go up on the west side in front of the old Froth Cafe, Maitre d' restaurant in that location. If council will recall, we had a plan on there to do paving stones and intermediate bollards that were removable. Just wondering, because of the cost that's out there now, how much it's over, that we planned that we remove that part of the contract and just go with the regular road paving in that location. Early estimates would probably save us approximately $100,000. So I just wanted to see where everybody was with that, and we can carry on.
Thank you for that. I'll look for clarification from the clerk. I think, Councillor LaRose, this would be a motion to reconsider, which take 2/3 majority, but I'll ask Stacey to clarify if I understand that correctly.
Thank you, Your Worship. The motion that was passed 2 weeks ago specifically states that council proceed with option 3 as outlined within the staff report, and that the financing required to complete the project proceed as outlined in the staff report. Again, as it's an item from Committee of the Whole finally being ratified, it doesn't require a motion to reconsider because it hasn't actually been decided by council.
Sorry, what council did decide on that section on the design portion of that.
With the choice of option 3?
Yeah, we decided on bollards in the sidewalk, so I'm fine with the debate.
From before, sorry.
We did give clear direction and clearly voted on that section, so that's what I'm asking on.
Sorry, I was thinking in terms of the last motion. That would take me looking up what that motion was in terms of clarifying those specific items, and it would require a motion to reconsider.
Okay. Councillor Rose?
Can we move a motion to reconsider it then?
I think that's probably appropriate. And the seconder for that motion, Councillor Rawson. Debate and comment to change that direction to staff on that particular section. Okay. We need 2/3, yes, 6 of 9. Councillor Lauder, comment, question?
Thank you, Your Worship. My only consideration at this point is that we're actually changing design, and then this would have to go back as a tender. We can't just say it's going to save us $100,000. It's going to have to change design. It's going to have to go back out, and the company's going to have to come to us with a new tender with respect to what it's going to cost without that option in there. So, yeah, I'm definitely not against it, not for it. Thank you.
Any other comments, questions?
My understanding is that it is a single itemized item in our tender process. Taking it out would not be a big deal to
Yeah,
it's
and
not
so-
like we got to re-tender or anything.
Sorry, and we're starting to get into the benefits of the sidewalk. Really, we're deciding as council if we want to reconsider the decision what we previously made. So, Stacey?
Just to clarify, any motion to reconsider a decision final of council would have to come forward as a notice of motion specifically. It's not something that we could just change on the fly today. It would have to come through notice of motion. I think that if council is specifically looking to investigate further what Councillor LaRose is looking to do, I think probably my recommendation would be that it be referred back to staff for staff to be able to provide direction on how to go forward with this this approval of this tender, because there probably would be some implications, and it's probably not fair to put our Director of Public Works on the spot in terms of answering those things right now. So that would be my only thought, that if council was interested.
Thank you for that. I think in terms of time sensitivity, council's pretty aware of this debate. We've been around here a lot, so I'd look for a motion to suspend the rules so we could actually, and that'll take 2/3 to actually debate it tonight. So motion to suspend the rules. We need 6 of us. Make sure we got 6. Keep your hands up if we're going to 2, 4. We got, okay, sir. Okay, so back to, we suspended the rules, so the motion in front of us is to reconsider the design on Main Street, moved by Councillor Rose, seconded by Councillor Rawson. Final comments or questions before I call the vote? All in favor of changing design as the recommendation by Councillors Rawson and LaRue? Councillor Rawson, please. Yes, thank you very much. Debate on that motion. Thank you, Councillor Rawson. All in favor of having a debate on reconsideration? We're debating on whether we want to reconsider it, Council. Yeah, thank you for that clarification, Doug. All in favor of reconsideration? Opposed? Okay, that is defeated because we needed 2/3. Thank you very much. Stacey, do you need just to receive the rest of it for information?
If the motion is passing as it was in committee, then
We're
yes,
fine?
please, yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Moving on to finance and corporate service. Oh, sorry, Councillor Rawson, please.
I don't know if you and leave of council would support this, but I did have one thing I wanted to pull on one of the planning items, if I could request that, please.
Absolutely.
Committee of the report for planning had an item 7B1, which had to do with the parking bollards option. I'd like to pull that, please.
Are we going back to the same conversation, just different on-ramp? Go ahead, Councillor Rawson, 7B1.
So I just look at this, and I think the spirit from council was to help with the beautification of one's property, and we talked about that. Staff brought forward a policy. I think there were some options that were presented there. I would bring a motion forward tonight that we look at the encroachment opportunity. We'll let staff work with the property owners and work through an encroachment process to make that work for them. It seems to be the most logical, simple process, and we just wanted to help with that, and we kind of got complicated with the policy framework. So I would like to, instead of putting this to bed tonight, if we can just, option 1 spoke about an encroachment agreement, and I'd like to move that forward.
So this is the one on Wolf Street, then?
Yes.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, thank
So
you very
it was
much. I was
presented as a
confused.
policy, and it was
Yeah.
an overarching policy.
Yes, okay.
That was defeated, so let's bring this forward.
Okay, so this is the one on Wolf Street. Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Levy? Okay. Okay, so just make sure, sorry, Doug, I was trying to keep pace of where we're going. So what is your actual motion, please?
Yeah, so back in the report, I'm just pulling up here, back in the report regarding 38 Wolf, option 1 was that the owners of 38 Wolf Street enter an encroachment agreement with the town respecting the boulevard garden and fence, and it goes on to speak what that looks like and the costs, and that council supports that this happen and allow the director and the CEO make this happen for the specific property for the beautification purpose.
So that's moved. We got a second here. Comments, questions before I call the vote on that? Councillor Lauder?
Thank you, Worship. I'm actually against the encroachment, because then we're saying to all of our residents throughout the town that every one of you can come forward to council and will come forward to council all the time for an encroachment. And I think it'd be more reasonable to have a policy with respect to this and deal with it once, as opposed to every individual situation that's going to come forward in the future. So, my decision. Thanks.
I will echo my mosquito and sledgehammer comments from earlier. Yeah, Councillor Levy?
The encroachment agreement system is very common. I remember Councillor Rawson got one years ago. I remember I got one years ago. It's simply a case-by-case basis. We don't do a lot of them, but it is done if there is a perceived need by the homeowner. So I just don't understand why we suddenly find this terribly onerous. It's not onerous. It's quite a simple operation. With council's approval, staff can look after this in a very timely fashion, and I fully support that and would ask for council support on this. Thank you.
All right, any other comments before I call for a vote? Councillor LaRue, please.
I agree with Councillor Levy. I know that we have dealt with many encroachments over the years and on an individual basis, so.
Okay. All righty, final comments. I got CEO and then the clerk.
Through your worship, if I may, just looking for clarity, option 1 in the report does identify that in addition, the owners would be responsible for the costs associated with the preparation of the encroachment agreement, estimated between $250 and $300. I know that was a discussion point amongst committee 2 weeks ago, so just wanted some clarification in terms of what the motion is going to read. If there was a proposed amendment, or if it was being recommended as is. And I missed that, my apologies, I wasn't sure how Councillor Rawson presented it.
I'll turn it to the mover and seconder just to clarify.
I'm surprised the CEO doesn't know my feeling on dollars and cents, but it was as written in the option 1, that, the property owner would pay the $250 to $300. I'm not that generous.
And the seconder agrees with that?
Seconder agrees.
Okay, okay, I'll call for the vote, then all in favor? And that opposed? And that is carried. Thank you very much. Move on to Finance and Corporate Services. Moved by the Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Saunders, that the recommendations contained within Committee of the Whole report related to Finance and Corporate Services section be approved. Does anyone wish to pull any of these items for further discussion or debate? See none, I'll call for the vote, then all in favor? And those are approved and carried. Thank you very much. Item 7A, yes. No, it's a recommendation, as Stacy said, we were fine. Thank you. Moving on to 7A, matters for consideration. It's moved by the Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Saunders. In accordance with Section 189 of the Municipal Act, the Town of Penetanguishene does hereby consent to the adoption of a bylaw by the County Simcoe for the operation of a transportation system. Deputy Mayor, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, this is something that has come from the county, and this is a formality. They need all municipalities to agree with the direction that's being proposed. It is going to be a rollout staged probably in 2018. The first linkage will be between Barrie and Orillia. And if that goes well, then I think the next one could very well be into Midland and Penetanguishene. So it's a great beginning to having transportation available to all of our citizens, enabling them to get to appointments, et cetera, in the city of Barrie and Orillia. So anyway, I hope council supports this. Thank
Just
you.
for clarity for council, so this is permission from the County Simcoe for intermunicipal transit, so not in the town of Penetanguishene. So the county would actually not take over, but bear the cost, the financial burden of the link, for instance, between Penetanguishene and Midland. That would come off our payroll, if you will, and go onto the county payroll. So it's intermunicipal is the undertaking by the county, and it has to go across the two-thirds majority of the County Simcoe for us to actually create the transit system that would link up all our municipalities. So that's kind of a little bit more background for you. Questions, comments, Doug?
Thank you. My only question is there any caveat that this is tied to our existing transit? We've all, I know we don't use the word pilot, but we're all under the assumption of a 2-year trial basis. Is there anything in here that's tied to the operation of our transit system? So if we didn't have one, or happen to seize at 2 years and 1 day, does this mean that this cannot happen? I just want to make sure there's no connection here.
No, my understanding, Doug, is there's not, Councillor Rawson, sorry, being a little informal because we're back in the back room there, Councillor Rawson, there's no connection there. So in the event that we didn't do transit here, we would still have a central pickup in Penetanguishene from the county. So how our citizens got to that pickup would be up to them, not up to us. Right. Okay, all in favor of that motion? And that is carried. Motions of which have been previously given. We have none. Notices of motion. Anybody wish to bring a notice of motion forward tonight? Seeing none, I'll move on to announcements. Sorry, consideration of bylaws. I think, Stacey, you're going to get me the motion for the bylaw? You've got it now? Well, thank you very much. This is under number 10, Stacey, we have none? I've got 13A here. That's at the very end, so we have no bylaws under number 10. Sorry, thank you very much. Questions from the media and public? Seeing none, announcements and inquiries from council. Deputy Mayor, please.
Yes, I just wanted to remind the residents of our community that Pumpkin Inferno down at Discovery Harbor commences this weekend. And also that hospice, Huronia Hospice, is having their kickoff capital campaign, which will be staged tomorrow afternoon, 3:30, at the location that they're out of now at our old hospital. So just welcome everybody to get involved in that. Thank you.
Yeah, and hospice, of course, the donation went through tonight, so their campaign's kicking off to a good start, thanks to council. Any other announcements or inquiries? I just have one. So I'm down to the Queen's Park on Monday for the French language conversation with both the Deputy Premier and the Minister of Francophone Affairs. We'll have that conversation, see if we can broaden our scope beyond the borders of the GTA. So that's happening on Monday as well, and I'll update council post that. Announcements or inquiries? Okay, we'll see none. On to confirmation bylaw, moved by Councillor Saunders, seconded by the Deputy Mayor, that the confirmation bylaw 2017-61 be signed and sealed by the Mayor and Clerk. All in favor of that? And that is carried. And we are adjourned, Stacy, at 7:20. And we'll move on to Committee of the Whole, and I'll call us to order at 7:21. Approval of tonight's agenda. Mover and seconder to get tonight's agenda on the road. Councillor Rawson, seconder. Councillor LaRue. Councillor Rawson, comments, questions?
Yeah, Your Worship, I'm just wondering if item 8B3, which is a presentation from Blackline regarding the draft results, if it'd be more appropriate to slide under 4B, which seems to be across all committees, and in fairness to everyone here, they can hear the presentation right off the hop, instead of waiting to the end of the night.
I'm fine with that. Council, anybody trouble with moving that forward? Okay. With that slight adjustment, all in favor? And that is carried. Declarations of pecuniary interest. Does anybody have a pecuniary interest tonight? Seeing none, I'll call for, or sorry, if you find yourself in that spot, let us know and we'll move on accordingly. And so then we'll move on to Councillor Rawson, which one was it again we moved ahead? Sorry, I'm just spotting it here.
Sorry, 8B3, it's a presentation from Blackline. It's an FCS, and I suggest to move it to 4B.
Here it is. Thank you very much. Yeah. Okay, so we'll move on to 8B3 and invite Blackline to come up for their presentation, please.
I was fine, though. I was suggesting after 4A, we got EXP there. But
Okay, that's fine.
Whatever you wish.
I think we'll let it, it's already up there. You know how to take as long to take that presentation down as to switch up. So, okay, let's go to 4A, the presentation from EXP, and then we'll go to 8B3. Thank you. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Your Worship and members of council. My name is Mark Beasy. I'm with EXP Services. I'm here with my colleague, Rob Hellick. And we're here to just discuss and give you a quick overview of a risk assessment for the Ojibwe Landing property with the municipal address of 111 Robert Street West in Penetanguishene. Oh, there we are. So this is our approximate property boundaries. You will see that it extends into the Penetanguishene Harbor. It's also the former campground on the west side of that property, as well as the current Rotary Champlain Wendat Park. So the site, especially on the west portion of that diagram, contains a former landfill, and as such, it is considered a brownfield site under the Ontario Regulations 15304 as amended. And as I mentioned, it's also recently been a municipal campground. Now, it is our understanding that this property has been identified as a priority for redevelopment. However, to be redeveloped in some of the manners that have been proposed, such as for mixed residential or commercial use or parkland use, a record of site condition under those regulations is required. And in order to get to that, we need to get that record of site condition by means of either remediation of impacts that have been previously identified or a risk assessment process, which I'm just about to explain. So a previous investigation done by another consulting company had identified impacts in soil and groundwater at the site that included contaminants such as petroleum hydrocarbons, metals, and other suites of chemicals. And they had identified that to remediate this property to meet the provincial standards could cost as much as $9 million. However, the risk assessment approach, which is both recommended and accepted by the Ministry of the Environment and Climate Change, is a valuable alternative to costly or onerous remediation. So risk assessment itself is a means of identifying the risk that is posed to human health and the natural environment based on exposure to a hazard, in this case, chemical contaminants in the environment, in this case, soil and groundwater, or even the sediment in the Penetanguishene Harbor. One thing, or a couple things to also remember about risk assessment is that, as I mentioned, is it accepted and it's recommended by the ministry, and it provides, with risk management, if required, the same level of protection for human health and the environment as the generic standards that are identified in the regulations. So, risk assessment itself, especially from an environmental standpoint, has four main steps where we define, well, what are the potential issues? In this case, this previous investigation had identified petroleum hydrocarbons, metals, and other types of chemical contaminants in the soil and groundwater that may be as a result of the former landfill operations or other potential contaminating activities that are also associated with the site, such as a former fuel depot that's south of the property. Then what is the magnitude? In this case, what are the concentrations of these in the soil and groundwater? And what effects could they have? What is the actual calculated risk as estimated through the accepted means that we have? And then, are these risks that we calculate or estimate, are they acceptable or are they unacceptable? However, if they are unacceptable, that is not necessarily a problem. And these risks are evaluated through what we call these exposure pathways. And this is a very generic conceptual model that shows the various types of exposure pathways for both human health and the environment. You'll see there's soil and groundwater. And these are just pathways that are associated either with inhalation of vapors from the contaminants that are in the soil and groundwater, the dermal contact that you might get if you get the soil on your skin, or if you incidentally ingest through whatever activities may be taking place on the property. And then you'll also see it also examines ecological pathways such as to plants, soil invertebrates, terrestrial mammals, birds, and even aquatic receptors such as fish or aquatic vegetation. And this is a conceptual model that is the type that we use in our initial evaluation through the risk assessment process. So if during the risk assessment, and given the site conditions that we've identified at the site and the proposed site use, if we identify potentially unacceptable risk, there are ways to manage it, which we consider risk management. And with the application of these risk management options, we may mitigate the risk. These risk management options can include, the ones I've listed up here are fairly simple or standard ones, such as we'll ensure that there's a restriction of potable wells on the site. Make sure that any outdoor workers have a health and safety plan, such as personal protective equipment, so that they minimize the amount of contact they might have with impacted soils. We might need to require that we have a hard or soft cap on the soil, such as either asphalt or concrete or clean soil on top. And then depending on, again, the types of contaminants that are there, we may need to require building restrictions, such as maybe a building with no basement, or a vapor mitigation system to ensure that any impacted, or vapors from impacted soil and groundwater do not get into the indoor air at any significant level. And sometimes these risk management measures can be used in conjunction with targeted remediation. So instead of going out and remediating the whole site, maybe there are some very small locations that are identified in the risk assessment for targeted hotspot removal. So it's key to remember that, as I stated earlier, the previous investigation had identified that a remediation of the site could be in upwards of $9 million. And a risk assessment process can greatly reduce that cost, while still, as I mentioned, providing the same level of protection to both human health and the environment. And it's also key to note that as the risk assessment is taking place, it is important to have conversation with the town with regards to what they would like to do with the property, what redevelopment they would like. But we also understand that the town's decisions on redevelopment may require an idea of what sort of conclusions the risk assessment is going to make. So in order to ensure that happens efficiently, the risk assessment and the planned redevelopment from the town can happen concurrently. So, well, thank you very much. Of course, if you have any questions, Rob and I would be very happy to answer.
Thank you very much. Questions for our guests tonight? Councillor Saunders and then Councillor Rawson, please.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I must admit, when I'm looking at your map of Ojibwa Landing, I'm very, very surprised. And what surprises me is the fact that a significant portion of Ojibwa Landing currently overlaps into Rotary Champlain Park. Now, I had thought, obviously wrongly, that Ojibwa Landing was only the portion to the left of your map. Are we advised, given the fact that the study is not complete yet, to continue to allow both human and, in this case, since it's the site of the animal park, the dog park, to allow them to continue to have access?
So let me just make sure I understand your question. You are asking that the Rotary Champlain Wendat Park, which is, of course, currently used by the public, you wish to ensure that it still can be accessed by the public while we are doing our investigation. Is that correct?
Yes, and that there's no danger posed to
Well, the actual site work we have to do is intrusive to the extent of we will need to drill some boreholes and install some monitoring wells at certain locations around the property. And there may be times where, for example, the dog park, I can't speak for the dog park specifically, but some areas in the park that may be off limits for brief periods of time. But in terms of the impacts that are currently identified or previously identified at the site, there is no immediate need for concern. What we are looking at is a regulatory requirement to identify the potential risks for the purpose of getting the record of site condition, for the purpose of redeveloping the property. That does not necessarily mean there's any need for public concern on an immediate basis.
So thank you very much for your answer. Since we are being streamed to our audience across the community, I think it's important that they recognize what you have just said, that there's no problem in continuing to use Rotary Wendack Park.
No, we don't have any expectation that there is, except for, as I mentioned, the fact that we will be needing to bring equipment out there to take soil samples and install monitoring wells.
I think Councillor Rawson was next, and then Councillor Levy.
Thank you, Worship. This is an interesting topic for many people. I'm just wondering what the timelines look like. We don't want to speed the process, but we'd like to have an idea what it would look like.
Well, we are looking to begin the actual site investigation itself in the next few weeks, because it is particularly important to get a start on this before the particular bad weather hits. But in terms of getting to the point where we get our record of site condition, the regulatory process, unfortunately, is not quick. It could be anywhere from 1 to 2 years, depending on the type of feedback we get from the Ministry of the Environment and Climate Change, as well as what we identify in the soil and groundwater. One big component of that is once we finish the site investigation itself and put together our risk assessment report, there is a regulatorily prescribed review period of 16 weeks or 4 months. And it is not, we don't really have experience of there being any fewer than 2 submissions before you get to the point of the record of site condition. So unfortunately, it's not an overnight process.
Councillor Levy, please.
Thank you very much. That leads into my question for yourself and perhaps Andrea. As far as process goes, I remember the convoluted discussion we had a few years ago when we were working under the old committee system about how we had to decide what we wanted done with the land before a risk assessment was complete. Can we open that up a little bit tonight and tell council what steps we have to take? How far can the risk assessment go before we actually make that final decision? Andrea, you're looking like you don't want to talk to me.
Sorry, Councillor Levy, I can field that question. Based on the old committee structure, at the time we received direction to use a mixed commercial use on the property. If you recall, I think that was a few years ago now. So that is the scope that EXP is working under right now.
My follow-up to that would be, I think council needs another discussion before we go too much farther on whether we need a full and fulsome discussion on what we would like the assessment to be directed towards, because I think a lot of us, well, maybe not, but I'm a little vague on that discussion and how we reached that conclusion and why. I thought we were looking for recreational facility. At the time, there was something in play. Help me out here, Mr. Mayor, but I don't actually remember the decision being commercial per se. I thought it was more recreational, but I would like to, perhaps not tonight, but at some point bring forward a motion to, it's been over a year, so I don't think we need a motion to reconsider, do we? Anyway, I'll let the mayor stick handle the rest of it.
Sure, I think maybe just a staff update on it, Brian, just to help us recall where we were and why we're going down this path. But it was a rec center, but we did broaden it up so that what we were trying to determine is, what opportunities can we chase down for this particular piece of land. So people knock on our doors were a little uncertain. We didn't want to be in a position, as I recall, to do one-off investigations of the property. So, got opportunity A, you check that out, we can't do A, so then we go to opportunity B. So we tried to broaden it a little bit. So if I look to the CAO with maybe, I don't know whether that's a referral item for later on, but maybe just a quick refresher 101, bring council back, repointed on this conversation.
Yeah, through your worship, I would suggest probably a referral item, just so we don't lose sight of it, but certainly a mechanism to ensure that if that's the will of council, when we get to the T&E section.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, if I, please go ahead.
Go ahead and finish your response.
Yes, if I may just add, the risk assessment process does allow for some flexibility. It doesn't necessarily come out with specific recommendations or requirements of what can only be done to the site, we can conduct it so that there is flexibility for whether you wish to have community centers or mixed residential, commercial, perhaps along Robert Street, and then extension of the parkland along the waterfront. There can be flexibility in that.
Thank you. Councillor Lauder, you had a question? You're good? Any other questions for our guests? Seeing none, thank you very much for your presentation. Look forward to further discussions and update from Brian at some point. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of your evening. So council, we did decide that we would move finance and corporate services up on the agenda to get 8.3B into place. So I will turn the chair over to the deputy mayor, and I suggest, deputy mayor, with council's permission, you do 8.3B, and then we do all of SCS, and then start at the start. Thank you. Our guests, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I would ask our guests to come forward to make their presentation. This is Blackline Consulting. We have hired them to do a service delivery review, and this is a preliminary report. The final report is to come before council sometime in November. I've just forgotten the date.
November 22nd.
Good. Now, I may ask one question. Are you going to go through the full 70-some-odd pages, or?
I am not. That's for your bedtime reading. You look at
Thank
that
you
again.
very much.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
There's 8 topics that I want to cover off tonight. I think I've got about 15 minutes. I'm going to go through it, so there's just plenty of time for questions. So thank you for your time tonight, though. First, I'll start with some good news. We're on track with time. So the plan that we had laid out originally, we're on track as to where we are today, as well as we don't foresee any delays that would set the further times off. We're aiming for November 22nd, which would be the next time that we come to council with the final report. As part of our review, one of the key things that we look at is influencing factors. And this is looking at mostly external factors that may have an impact on municipal services. Some of the key things that came out, which aren't necessarily unique to this municipality, some others are also seeing the same thing. As you can see on the graph, and it's something that's happening with other municipalities, is the population is shifting to a smaller, older demographic. And that's what that chart shows you, that the only area that's been growing in terms of your population is the 65 and over. This isn't unique to yourself, but the one thing for us as we go through the review is making sure that how do your services, one, align to the demographic, and two, the service levels that apply to them. The second one, again, not unique to this municipality, but there's growing regulation and legislation that's coming out, and that has several implications. Some more specific to some of the functional areas within municipalities, such as public works. There's new legislation that's coming down around asset management that'll definitely have an impact on them. Others will have a more pervasive impact, and I'm sure everyone's aware of the wage increase that was announced about a month ago. That, again, will also have an impact on the municipality. Some of the other observations that we did want to highlight in terms of influencing factors are also, there's 2 elections that are coming up, and with that, there's a bit of uncertainty, and in some cases more with the provincial government is delays in and uncertainty around certain decisions making. That can cause a bit of complexity for municipalities in terms of what you have on your own plans. I think it's really important, the final point here, which is as we looked at the municipality, work drivers have also increased. So I mentioned some of the legislation that had come in or is on its way. There's other things as well. I'm going to point out with the recreation services, there's been a significant investment that's been made to the town. Looks lovely. The waterfront, you've got an amphitheater, you've got the splash pad. But with that comes work as well. Managing that, upkeep. So it's making sure that as work volume increases, there's also a commensurate view of are we able to maintain it and keep it as beautiful and available for your constituents to use. Just for reference, as we go through this, in the bottom corner, for those that have the report, there's a reference for the page number in case you want to look at any information. This is the interim report, and for me, one of the key things is making sure that we give an accurate perspective of the current state. It's also a transitioning point for us as giving you what the emerging themes are, what's the direction of travel in terms of improvements. And to date, what we've been able to we'll share with you just shortly is we've been able to identify about 60 opportunities, and there's two buckets that we put those opportunities in. One that is more beneficial around service improvement, so the quality of service or the type of services that deliver to the constituents. And the second is around efficiency. Can we be more efficient on how we deliver those services? So those are the two primary buckets. They're not mutually exclusive, but for what we look at is the key drivers, what's the biggest benefit? There's 9 themes which are down the side. We'll get into those in the next few slides, so forgive the font size here, but in the next slides you'll be able to see that. The other thing that we've been able to do is marry those opportunities up against what's the impact in terms of the actual municipality itself. So is it cross-departmental? Is it more specific to one department? So we've been able to go through some of that analysis. And again, what you'll see in November is this moving forward. Right? So there'll be more detail about this and packaged up slightly differently. Some of the 9 themes, I'm going to go through each one. I don't think the first one's any surprise to anyone, but part of what we looked at is how you operate today and the use of technology. And one of the things from the resident survey that we had, there's basically 2 channels that we found that residents want to interact with in terms of the municipality, which is walk-in, being able to walk in, talk to someone, answer questions. The second one was online. Now, one of the key opportunities that we look at is and technology can be an efficiency driver, but also there's an element of this which is going to be driven from the province, which is the Open Data Directive. And part of that is legislation, and it's enabling more data to be accessible to the public through the municipality. So that's one driver. The second one is, can we do more things online? Instead of having to come in, mail information, can I register my kids on a program online? Can I fill out the forms online instead of having to print them out and bring them in? Moving to the side, capability. And one of the key areas that we looked at for capability is how do we improve performance management and improve the capability that we have today? How do we make sure that they've got the right skills, training, composition, and that we're giving them valid performance reviews to improve them? Another aspect with that, and one of the opportunities that we're reviewing, is cross-training. Municipality has a finite number of resources. You need to use them as best possible. Are there areas where we can leverage some of the other resources and cross-train them on similar areas within their function? The final one of the capabilities, making sure that we're attracting and recruiting the seasonal staff so that it marries up to the actual timeline that we need them, so that we don't have any gaps in terms of the seasonal employees are here, but some of the aspects that they manage continue on beyond when they're there, and there's a constraint put on those resources. Communications, interesting topic for a lot of municipalities, and for me, we looked at it in 2 aspects, which is internally to see how well does it work, as well as externally. Internally, what we found is that there's opportunities to improve some of the consistency and provide a bit more streamline around how information flows within the organization. Externally is, can we do a better job of promoting and communicating out to the public on events, things that are happening, as well as coordination with some of our other municipalities in the area. Governance, key thing for governance is making sure that the right people get the right information to make the decisions. And so for me, one of the key aspects that we look at is, are there practices or onboarding exercise to make sure that it's really clear in terms of what the rules are and how to engage between committees, council, and senior management, making sure that's really clear, and also giving some framework for new employees that come on board so they understand that. The second is strategic planning, and one of the key things that you'll hear from me tonight is strategic plan for the municipality is really important so that there's clear direction. Where are we going? What are we doing? And then how does that then flow down to how we operate and how we prioritize some of the work? The final 2 are looking at, one, are there opportunities where we can rationalize the council size, the committees that we operate, as well as some of the bylaws and how we manage bylaws. How can we make it a little bit easier on the bylaws that we have, the type of bylaws, how we manage them, and when we have to pull some of those, can we search and find them easily and understand how they link together or don't? The final 9, there's an element where we look at the equipment. Are we making efficient use of our equipment? There's a lot of equipment that a municipality uses. Are we making sure that we're getting good value out of it? And also, are we able to store and maintain them adequately? Procurement, the municipality will continue to purchase services as well as raw goods. How do we ensure that we make sure all of the areas across the municipality from the functions are able to be equipped on how best to go out, contract, manage vendors, and contain costs and make sure that you get good quality outcomes. Record management, this one's tied very closely with technology. There's an element here which is, can we be more efficient around using records and information that are stored not physically but digitally so that we can search and we can find them, as well as avoid some of the risks on just having them physically. Fires, floods can be quite problematic for physical copies. We also looked at process, and there's several aspects around process within the organization that we looked at around use of automation. Time and attendance was one that came up. Some of the other areas that we looked at was how complaints and customer service is managed, as well as grants and due dates for property taxes. The final is around capacity and making sure that workload marries up with the capacity that you have, making sure that we've got the right amount of resources, the proper resources to deliver on the services that we have today. In terms of services, one of the asks that was in the RFP that we need to respond to is the services. So providing an index of all the services as well as an assessment of how does the town perform in terms of the services as well as the service levels. What I can tell you is there is a large section in the report, which is about, I think it's about 26 pages related to the services. So it's fairly in-depth analysis. What I can say is that you're broadly in line with peers. But in terms of some of the services, you actually provide more services, which to some of you may not be a surprise, but some of the services that you provide would be more inclined with services from a larger municipality. When we looked at those services, a lot of those are services that are driven from residents, things that you want in terms of either recreational services, transit. Those are services that, there's the main driver is coming from the constituents. Some of the things that came out overall, I thought was great. We did quite a bit of interaction with residents in terms of survey. We had town halls. We also had residents from the advisory committees show up and give us feedback. Overall, I'd say the satisfaction was good, the services. The only areas of concern were roads, Main Street, economic development. From a delivery standpoint, I can comment on that in terms of other comparators, Penetanguishene is actually quite progressive in its use of shared services, which is great. In most cases, it provides greater efficiency as well as leverage and scale of economies. I won't touch on the RCS. We've already talked about that, but that's been an area where it's been expanded. Some of the other services and some of the clerical responsibilities we would have typically seen under the clerks. It's moved to recreational services. It's followed an individual, not uncommon with smaller municipalities that have constraint around headcount. Finally, I thought it was important just to highlight around the roads, which is actually the roads are in good shape compared to peers. Headcount, something that always comes up in these reports, which is do we have adequate headcount? And as you can see with this graph, this is a comparison to your peers. And there's some immediate observations that you can make from that. But overall, I think one thing that we need to mention is over the past 3 years, it's been fairly consistent. So even though some of the things have increased, you haven't necessarily increased your headcount to kind of compensate for the increase in workload. In terms of relative terms, the headcount, you're lower than your peers. As you can see in the graph, it's the aqua color. You have a larger percentage of seasonal employees. The benefit that you have with the mix is that you're much easier for variable costs. So from a cost perspective, it's good to have some of that variation compared to some of your peers. On the other side, it's making sure that for those seasonal employees, you're able to onboard them efficiently, get them up and running, and manage them efficiently, making sure that you've got coverage for the season that you need. We also did a comparison, which is in the report, which is the distribution of your staff. So Public Works, Recs, Administration, and broadly in line as well in terms of what we saw across the different departments. The final point on here, span of controls, one thing that we look at is how many people look after in terms of reporting lines. So how many people are reporting to myself? The challenge we always see with smaller municipalities, there's always going to be some element of inefficiency. You can't have a large span of control. But one of the areas that we've looked at is, are there opportunities to increase that? There are areas where you have large span of control, which is great, and other areas where they're smaller. Property tax. We looked at property tax. In terms of the property tax rate, yes, among one of the higher. What we did is when we actually delved into it, though, and we looked at the value, the actual dollar amount that people spend, you're actually quite close to the average. So for me, this is a very important message to get across, that from a dollar perspective, you actually don't pay that much more than your peers. The waterfront, so if you are on the waterfront, unfortunately, there is a significant increase. But on average, you're very close to your peers. So for me, this is a very important element to call out, which is, although the tax rate might be high, it's the dollar amount that's really important. Expenses and revenue have broadly moved in the same direction, which is good. The other thing that we found is you're among the lower end in terms of the costs. So per household, you're actually, the costs are fairly low. We also looked at revenue and the distribution of revenue. So usually there's things from how much it comes from taxes, as well as what we call user charges. So permits, paying for some of the facilities and so on. And in that space, you actually fared very well as well. So you're not completely reliant on taxes, which is a good message. And in terms of the composition of your expenses, it's broadly in line with your peers as well. There was a couple areas that we noted where it's a little bit off. So above average in terms of contract costs, but lower in terms of materials and amortization. Finally, the comparator analysis. So there was just some other things that we looked at. I've covered off a bunch of it. I would say overall, one of the things that, and the steering committee knows about this, when we look at peers, really good, peers to Penetanguishene, it's difficult for a few factors. Size, Francophone, you've got a correctional facility as well as a mental facility, you're on the water. So those factors, the combination of them make it quite difficult. So that's why, for me, as well as the services you provide, it is quite difficult. We went beyond just looking at Simcoe, and we specifically looked at other ones that have some of those key characteristics. So that was the peer group, and for me, it was interesting to see some of the results. But I think that's important. We've talked about the workforce. The council size, again, we've got some analysis to say. It's about on the left-hand side, or right-hand side, just about the fourth one down, which is the median is 7. You have 9. The min is 5. So there's an element there to look at where you are. You're in the upper quartile for the council member size. In terms of expenditures, we've covered off. So I think all that other information we've covered off. But again, this does highlight also the workforce where you guys are, which is lower. And I hope I did it in 15 minutes, but I think I may have been over.
Thank you, John. Yes, very interesting. I wonder if you would have available to all members of council the presentation that you made this evening. It's a little more condensed than what we have.
Absolutely, happy to. Yeah.
Great.
Stacy
Thank
has
you.
it, so we're absolutely happy we can send that out.
Thank
after.
you.
Yeah, absolutely.
I ask council if they have questions. No questions. That's good.
thank you for your time.
I know that, I knew, he was just thinking about it.
Yeah,
right.
just sorry, it's Joe. One of the things I was trying to wrap my mind around is we invest in our town, so, we spent millions of dollars on our park. We're going to spend $10 million on our Main Street next year. So we've done a lot of investments over the last, several years. And so what I'm trying to wrap my mind around is, so if you go to our park, for instance, I know we have a deficiency in our park, and the reason I say that is the park is not as clean as it should be. It's not as vibrant as it used to be. And I see my senior citizens out there weeding the garden. So it tells me I have a staff shortage there. So how do you determine, our investment in an asset and how that asset gets at risk if we don't have the proper staff levels to maintain that? I'm trying to wrap my mind around that because I sense a little bit of risk. I understand the reluctance sometimes to hire more staff to do more things, but the price that you pay will be an asset that looks okay today, but 5 years from now you go, oh my God. So how do we reconcile that?
So there's two elements for me, and one, when we look at any kind of infrastructure investment, and it's how much do we expect in terms of the work volume increase, and that's difficult. It is difficult, and we do work in the private sector as well. They don't do a great job either. So there's that element, which is making sure that when we do the capital investment, do we also include that ongoing maintenance cost with it? The second one is, once it's in, then you have a much more reality, a perspective of what is the true work volume. And then the question becomes, how do we resource it? Is it part-time? Is it contract? Is it full-time? So for me, one of the big ones, and it's one of the areas that we're doing some investigation, is workload management. When we look at an asset, or the assets that we have, or even the services that we provide, what's the workload volume? And then how does that then relate to the time or effort that we need from individuals to manage it? So.
Yes, if I could subsequently.
Yes.
And so there's a lot of discussion here on peers, and I wrestle with that because at the end of the day, the priorities of the town of Penetanguishene, the service standard levels are directed by this council and previous councils that have set that standard. So the standards of a Godrich or a Midland or a Tiny or a Tay are not the same standards. So I wrestle with the value of peer-to-peer conversations because we know different demands. So I see Godrich as a peer, but Godrich just went through a tornado. So if you looked at it over the last 5 years, they're doing something completely different than any other of the 444 municipalities. Midland's done a police review, and I shipped their dispatch over, so they're in flux. I see Tiny in there, but you can't compare Tiny because Tiny doesn't clear sidewalks, we do. So how does that peer-to-peer matter to me? I guess I'm recognizing, part of me says it doesn't matter, but maybe it does, and I'm just missing the dot why it does.
I'm really glad you said that, to be honest, because the work that we do with municipalities, some are very focused on what are they doing, because I need to keep up with them, which I think the bigger matter is, and this is for me, with this type of reviews, you have to make decisions on what you think is right for your constituents, irrespective of what Midland or North County or anyone else is doing. So for me, it's another data point. It gives you a perspective, and I think that's all you should take it as, because at the end of the day, you have to do what's right for your constituents. So that's for me, and I completely agree, and I'm really glad that you said that. Really glad. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Rawson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Myself and the Deputy Mayor and Councillor Rue on the committee, and just for everyone's point, this is just the draft interim, so there'll be a further report coming at the end, so we're just halfway through, and I think John and your team's done a great job. There's cross-representation of all departments, so everyone's digging into this. To echo what the Mayor just asked about why are we comparing, mainly because it was in the scope of the project. This council was the one that put out the RFP and approved that RFP. And we asked for a dig into the service deliverables across the organization. We asked for comparators, so they're following through with what we asked for. So they're not just pulling that out.
Just for point of clarity, I wasn't questioning that. I was asking the value of it.
Point of order, I'm just following up with a comment. But everything that has been brought up tonight has been based on feedback from that RFP, and John and his team has delivered everything that's been asked from the project deliverables, and there's been input from this council and from the committee members throughout. So I think, John, you guys have done a great job, and thanks for your draft report tonight.
Good. Further comments? Yes, Councillor Lauder.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I also want to provide that same comment because I'm really excited. You've done a great job of collecting data, and now I really see as your jobs coming into play where you're going to analyze that data and come forth with some sort of analysis and some sort of comments and suggestions that council we will then look at and apply to our residents within Penetanguishene. So what I see here is just 100, 200, was a lot of reading, but it was all data coming in. You've done a great job. Now I look forward to the next stage. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you, Councillor Louder. Further comments? No, and I will echo that this is just a preliminary report. As I said in the beginning, the final report will come before council sometime in November, and we're looking forward to that. There's a lot of good data, and I think a lot of good will come from this analysis. Thank you again, John.
Great. Thank you. And thank you for the opportunity tonight. Thank you.
Good. Now, Your Worship, am I going to finish up with
I suggest
finance
we
and
finish off
corporate?
finance corporate services and go to the start.
Very good. So, item number 8A is our consent agenda. Recommended action that the following consent agenda items, having been given due consideration, be received for information. Moved by, do I have a mover? His Worship, seconded by Councillor Rawson. It's Police Service Board minutes. Are there any questions? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Matters for consideration. Our first item is a request from Tiny Township re the Champlain Commemoration Committee. Recommended action that we accept one of the options that are before us this evening. I need a mover. Do I have a mover for this item? Yes, Your Worship?
Yes, I'd like to move it, but I'd like to, Stacey, I just don't have the option in front of me. My screen's not up. So I'd like us to pay that bill, so I'm putting forward an option, whatever one was to, option one. Thank you very much.
Option one, I do
I'd be
believe.
moving option one, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Option 1 reads that council approve the Township of Tiny's request for $6,000 funded by the 2016 contingency budget of $50,000 that will be brought forward during the 2016 year-end surplus analysis. So that's what is before us. I had a mover, but I need a seconder. Councillor Louder, discussion. Yes, Your Worship.
Apologize, this, Councillor Richard Hinton came to us from Tiny Township and explained this to me, and I was looking for a better report. So I apologize to council. The report we got in was really lacking clarity, but the issue, as I understand it, was we had a 3-year contract with an employee, contract employee, and it was a diminishing amount of salary in the contract with Trillium Grant. So, I'm going to say it's like $50,000 year 1, $40,000 year 2, and $30,000 year 3, let's say. And so what we did as a group, all 3 municipalities said, listen, nobody's going to hire on, so we just took that number, divided it by 3. And it wasn't until, so we were carrying over a surplus in year 1, surplus in year 2 to pay for the final salary in year 3. In year number 3, the Trillium Group told us you can't carry surpluses over, and therefore we ended up with a shortfall. It was inadvertent, unanticipated, but that's how my understanding is how this pickle came to be, as I recall. So just a little more clarity for council and a little background, at least to my knowledge, how it went down.
Thank you, Your Worship. I know I did have a discussion with our treasurer today about this particular item, and I know it was a Trillium grant in the beginning that this committee did receive, and we have not contributed anything to that committee structure that was put in place. Once we got our own funding for our Champlain activities, it seemed like there was they kind of worked together for a bit, so this has been left over. Anyway, that's just further clarification. Questions? Seeing none, I will call for the vote. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you, Council. Move on to number 2, composite fee schedule, review and municipal comparisons. The recommended action that the proposed amendments with respect to fees and charges for the town of Penetanguishene be approved as presented, and that the clerk be directed to bring forward the necessary bylaw amendment required for council approval. Moved by, do I have a mover? I need a mover. Councillor LaRue. What's this guy's name? Okay, questions on this composite fee? No? Madam Clerk, did you want to clarify anything on this composite fee? Everybody's okay? All right. Councillor Rawson?
I just want to bring up one point as a clarification point. A while ago, a request was made about the user fee for skating, for minor hockey and the like, and we looked at subsidy for non-town and town. My understanding is this is reflected in here as a user fee rate for ice time, for non-prime, prime, and for hockey and the like, and that's covered there. If we want to look at any relationships like that, we'll have to knock on some doors. Is that an accurate statement?
And are you asking
I'm
our
assuming
Director of
Sherry.
Recreation?
Yeah, I would assume.
Sorry, Councillor Rawson, I don't understand your question.
A while ago, we made a request for ice subsidy and we use minor hockey or girls skating, whatever groups are using the arena, that the subsidy amount could be directly reflected to the town residents' registration fee. That went back to staff to look at. Council asked that it goes back to staff to look at. I didn't see anything come back, and now I see a prime rate and a non-prime rate, and it reflected for minor hockey and skating clubs. So I'm just wondering, where are we with that?
There's a referral item under the recreation section to bring a report forward in Q4.
Is that satisfactory, Councillor Rawson?
I'll leave it like that for now.
Thank you. There's no further discussion. I'll call for the vote. All those in favor? Carried. On to we did do our number 3 has been taken care of. Referrals to upcoming agendas. That Finance and Corporate Services section endorse the following additional and existing referrals to upcoming agendas and staff. Community engagement initiatives, land sale policy review, smoking policy on parks and town property, 2018 election, and we have finance composite fee schedule comparison. I guess we can take that one off, Madam Clerk. And finance, insurance, and joint RFP review. Is there anything to be added? Yes, Councillor Rawson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Tonight, we just approved Main Street. Next year's going to be a lot of expenditures for the lake. We're also in election year next year. There's a possibility that we'll be in a lame duck next year. I would like to move a referral item that the CEO has an authority level to be able to do business on behalf of the town if this council becomes a lame duck position. So I would like to add that as a referral item, that staff can make that kind of work, and if we need to tweak something for the CEO, that can happen.
Thank you. Our clerk wants to comment to that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Actually, I think our CAO can hopefully correct me if I'm wrong, but it is something that we're working on in terms of a delegated authority bylaw that would include the timelines that would relate to any potential lame duck situation. So certainly it can be added as a referral item, but just for council's knowledge, it is something that we're working towards.
Thank you. Is that satisfactory, Councillor Rawson? Good, good. Yes, Your Worship.
Just for clarity, Stacey, if you could, we're using the lame duck term. Our citizens watching in the crowd on TV might not know what it is. So what is the definition of lame duck, and what is the conversation? I know the 9 of us understand. I'm not sure those out there were understanding what it was.
Thank you, Your Worship. I can give you my very layman's terms version of what I believe is a lame duck. It is more related to a financial thing, so perhaps our CIO or our treasurer would be better at describing it, but it's a certain period of time when, in an election year, when it's been determined that the council members that are running will no longer be able to spend a certain amount of money. It's very regulated in the Act. In the Election Act and the Municipal Act. I just don't have it all in front of me specifically now, but it's about financially limiting a council.
And that's if how many members of council are running or not running.
That is information that is not in my mind.
I'll look that up, just so I can get it out in front of our citizens. Okay, thank you very much.
Very good, thank you. I need a mover and a seconder for this. Councillor Saunders and seconded by Councillor Rawson. There's nothing to add. I'll call for the vote. All those in favor? Great, thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you very much. We'll go back to item number 5, Section 8, Transportation and Environmental Services, and turn the chair over to Councillor Rawson, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. 5A is our consent agenda. It's recommended that the following consent agenda items have been given due consideration be received for information. Number 1 is the Georgian Bay Township Council resolution on the invasive species. 2 is the Drinking Water Quality Management System Management Review meeting minutes of March 13th and June 13th of 2017. Number 3 is the Ojibwe Landing Risk Assessment Communication Plan Report. And 4 is a transit ridership update. Does anybody want to remove any of these items for further debate? Deputy Mayor.
The invasive species, please.
And I saw Councillor Lauder.
Thank you. The transit ridership update, please.
I knew you were that one. Any other members? A mover on the remaining items. Mayor Marshall, seconder. Councillor Lauder. We'll call for the vote on these ones. We'll go back. So for these remaining items, we'll call for all those in favor of and opposed. That is carried. And Deputy Mayor, number 1, the invasive species.
Thank you very much. There is a motion that is attached to this item, and I guess I would like perhaps to have it read and that we would support it. Well, perhaps I will ask Madam Clerk if she would read the, I can read it, but. Oh, you don't have it? Okay. It says, whereas the Township of Georgian Bay has identified invasive plant species that are a threat to our natural environment, our ecosystem, and our resident health. And whereas the Township of Georgian Bay is working proactively with the District of Muskoka and many volunteer groups to hopefully eradicate these invasive plant species. And whereas the cost to provide these local programs is rising each year, and whereas the identified plant species being giant hogwood, Japanese knotweed, and pragmatis are currently found growing along provincial highways, namely Highway 400 in our municipality and our Crown lands. And whereas the seeds from these plants are migrating onto municipal lands and municipal road allowances as well as privately owned lands. And whereas the fast-spreading invasive plant is Pragmatis, which is currently eradicating wetland cattail fields, which are a huge benefit to our ecosystem. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Council of, would be the Town of Penetanguishene, requests the Ministry of Natural Resources, the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change, and the Ministry of Transportation to work collaboratively to eradicate these invasive species on provincially owned lands. And that a copy of this resolution be forwarded to, I would not suggest that we send it on to Ontario municipalities, but just send it on to our members of Parliament and to the Premier, Kathleen Wynne. So do I have...
So that's your mover? You're moving that
I'm
item?
moving that,
Seconder for
yes.
that, Mayor Marshall will call for the vote. All in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Anything further on that item, Deputy Mayor?
No, I'm good. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
And Councillor Lauder, transit ridership updates to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick little question. First of all, I want to thank you, Brian, for including the cost-revenue analysis. That was very good in the report. I just want to ask, the gas tax funding, is that included in this report? So that funding from gas tax is additional revenue that's not showing here, is that correct?
That's correct. The revenue shown on the report is revenue gained from ridership fares, so riders coming on using their pay passes, also ridership from the various programs at the Waypoint facility and Ontario Works, I believe.
Great. And just as a follow-up to our public, I want to say that we're doing extremely good with respect to this transit system. The fact that just the round numbers that are on the screen, that are on your report, but also I did some extrapolation to the full year, and it looks like we're going to be, when we add in the 70,000 gas tax approximately?
I believe it's 84,000.
84,000, even better than my calculations, because when we add those in, then our costs to the revenues that are being generated are actually extremely close. And as such, as of right now, I'm seeing that the transit program is falling, not necessarily right in the black, but very, very close to the black. So kudos to the transit program and everything else so far, and I think we're doing a great job. Thank you.
Any further discussion on this item? We'll move this item. Councillor Lutter, are you going to move this? Seconder on this? Deputy. Councillor Levy. All in favor? Opposed? That is carried. 5B is matter for consideration. Number 1 is a verbal update regarding Main Street sewage treatment plant. Brian, do you have an update? You did one last time. Do you have one today? Either?
I can inform, thank you, Mr. Chair, I can inform council that we've completed, our asphalt contractor has completed some deficiencies within the parking lot of the SDP plant this past week, and we're also awaiting the results of an inspection that was taken place last week from our inspector and contract administrator regarding the deficiencies that have been completed by our various mechanical and electrical subcontractors. So I am anticipating that in the next week or so, and looking towards a substantial reduction in our deficiencies on site.
Thanks. Thanks, Brian. Brian, I'm hearing a question about, do we know when the official opening might be?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. We are looking at providing a open house event for council in the fall this year. To allow council to go tour the plant and tour the various facilities within the plant. So I hope that answers your question.
And I think we may get a definitive when would fall be. I think that's what the fall might be. I'm just guessing.
I guess I would answer that question. I would say sometime in November. I'd like to possibly tie this event with an event with the province and the federal government, to tie that media event with the tour. So I'm looking at arranging that in the near future.
Thanks, Brian. Mayor Marshall.
Just curious, Brian, is there a chance for our citizens to maybe we could set up a tour or some kind of schedule, maybe on a weekend? I'm sure there's a curiosity beyond 9 of us sitting here that might want to. Just a thought, and you don't commit to it tonight, but just my thought goes to, if you have kind of an open house weekend where it could be kind of scheduled for tours or something, we might want to turn our mind to that.
Yeah, I could take that offline and speak to the CAO with council's approval there.
Thank you. Any other members for SCP update? Number 2 is the Tiny Township 20 Fire Hall request access town-owned facility. It's recommended the town of Penetanguishene enter into a license agreement with the Tiny Township to access the town's elevated water tank, and that the financial option 1 or 2 be approved, and finally the clerk be directed to bring forward the necessary bylaw for council approval. So we need a mover with an option. Deputy Mayor?
Option 2, and I
Option
do
2 by the
move
Deputy
option
Mayor
2.
and a seconder, Councillor LaRue. Discussion. Seeing none, we'll call for the vote. All in favor? And opposed? That is carried. Number 3 is the addition of bike lane closure to the traffic and parking bylaw 2012-23 as amended. It's recommended that the traffic and parking bylaw 2012-23 be revised to include the closure of all designated bike lanes within the town during the winter season of November 1st to April 1st as outlined in the staff report, and that the necessary bylaw amendment be brought forward for council approval. The report speaks to this about being risk and mitigating risk and being able to adequately maintain that. I have a mover for this item, Mayor Marshall, seconder, Councillor LaRue. Discussion? Seeing none, we'll call for the vote. All in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Before I read the referrals, are there any further referral items for any members? I don't remember that one.
It's been that type of night. Stacy, what's our referral?
Ojibwe, the Ojibwe landing.
Yeah, update. Thank you.
Yes.
So, Jeff, just for process, you bring that back next time with the timeline and what the... Any further referral items for any members of council? Seeing none. The Transportation Environmental Services section endorse the following additional and existing referrals to upcoming agendas and staff. We have 3 items: the Thompson's Road West extension options. Something tells me last time we moved this out to 2019, last council day, because of Main Street, and I'm just confident of that. So Thompson's Road should be 2019. Champlain Road weight limits, Q4 of 17. There was discussion on this, sorry. I'm just remembering last time. Champlain Road weight limits, did we have not discussion about that last time? I thought we removed it as well.
Actually, Councillor Ross and I had brought the point up and asked that it be removed. I didn't see the need for it, but then I was told that there was a report coming back to us.
Good job. Brian's going, yeah. And transit renewal options. A mover? Councillor Levy, seconder Councillor Saunders. All in favor? Opposed? And that is carried. Question period from the media and public. Seeing none, it's back to you, Your Worship.
Thank you very much. We move on to Section B, Recreation and Community Services, and I'll turn the chair over to Councillor LaRue, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Consent agenda, recommended action that the following consent agenda items, having been given due consideration, be received for information. 1, Heritage Committee minutes, Seniors Council minutes of August 22, the Trails Committee minutes of June 6th, Tourist Information Center minutes of 2017, and the Library Board minutes, June 19, 2017. Any of those, Councillor Saunders? No? Moving? Seconder? All in favor? Carried, thank you. Matters for consideration, a verbal update, Curling Club lease agreement, and we pass it on to our Director of Recreation.
Thank you, Councillor LaRue. So just to recap where we've been with the Curling Club, we were directed by Council to set up an ad hoc with the Curling Club, and unfortunately we were unable to agree on terms for an agreement. So we, staff met with Council and proposed a new agreement that was approved by Council, and we were directed to present it to the Curling Club for consideration. The Curling Club recently had an annual general meeting with their membership to consider the agreement, and unfortunately it was not deferred but not accepted at that time. They did have some discussion, and we have since received correspondence from the club president after the AGM to request that our solicitors meet once again to discuss the agreement. Staff confirmed that we had very clear direction from Council that the agreement presented is the one to be considered. We've since received correspondence from their solicitor, and they are having a board meeting tonight for the board to vote on the agreement that has been presented.
Questions, concerns, or do we leave it go until we hear back from the board? Okay, carried. Pickleball. Pickleball recommended action that council proceed with option whatever as outlined within the staff report. And you do have the staff report. And questions or concerns? I thought you weren't going to say anything. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to say it's a good report, excellent report. Thank you very much, Sherry, presenting multiple options. Before I actually say that, kudos to Marlena and of course RCS in putting together a pickleball event for the town, and it plays on Wednesday nights. A little difficult for me to attend some of them, but in fact what's happened is last week, the first pickleball event at James Keating Elementary School, saw 22 players come out to enjoy the evening. Extremely good. They are loving it. It was a cross mix, some experience, and some novice, brand-new people, which I was there that time and spent a lot of time coaching and helping them out. So it is a great sport potential for our town. So what I'd like to do, I'd like to put forth a motion that we accept item number A, I believe it is, yes. Location A, it's a huge field. Sherry, Renee, and I have walked that field and find that it would have excellent benefits to our current facility, some potential in the future, however we want to expand. And I'm not even saying for pickleball, but for other developments that the town is looking forward to. So I'd like to put forth option number A with a slight amendment that we're not actually, I don't think we actually have to deal with it tonight, but rather bring it forth. Let's put it forth that Sherry brings this costing, whatnot, and location A into budget of 218, which we start in a couple of weeks' time.
Thank you, Councillor Lauder. I would probably go along that line with option A, because I certainly would not support option B. I do not think that with the baseball diamond there, if we had tennis courts, we have bocce ball, and then if we put in the pickleball, and then we know that the Friends of the Youth are planning on redeveloping the playground area there, I think it would be a little, this wouldn't make any sense to remove 18 parking spots out of our newly paved parking lot. So if we were going the route, then I would certainly go with the route of option A. Councillor Rawson.
I wasn't going to say anything, but now I have to. I think we have to defeat A. The reason, we've only had one time. You just said it just started last week with 22 people. We said a while ago we're going to do this. Let's do it for a season, so we make out. It's possible in the 9th week your 22 people ends up being 5. The report was written a little while ago, said there was 5 people registered. Let's just give it a season, see how it makes out. We're over budget on Main Street. We're over budget on Navy Lane. We can keep going on and on where we are with the budget items. We don't have $140,000 for a 1-week trial. Let's do this as a season, let's see how it does, and then we can look at planning it later. But we have too many priorities. 2 weeks ago, we talked about doing trail work, and there was a request for $4,000. And I said, no, we don't have the budget line for that. Let's defer that to the 18 budget. So that's come forward in the 18 budget. Oh, and so is pickleball for $140,000. Let's finish the trial. We haven't even done the trial. We've done 1 week of it. Come on. I don't know what the priority is here. So let's defeat A.
Further comments? Deputy Mayor.
Yes, I would like clarification. When we talked about pickleball some time back, there was a discussion about converting part of the existing tennis court. Where is that? Is that gone 100%? It has. And we had allocated some dollars to repair part of that, but that hasn't happened either. So does that mean that that's another item that will be part of budget discussions?
It would have to be part of the discussion, because there was part that was dedicated this year for the tennis courts, but it was not adequate, wasn't substantial, so we had to go back out. And would have to be added to the 2018 budget. Capital budget.
Just one more comment, Mr. Chair. I know pickleball is certainly a coming sport. I know a video was supplied to all of us just today. It was very exciting to see what's happened in a small community, which would be very much the size of Penetanguishene. I certainly would like to see it as part of budget discussions, but I'm not so sure that I would want to commit $140,000 at this particular time.
Your Worship.
Just a question through to you, Mr. Chair, to probably Carrie or perhaps Sherry. So it's $133,000, but actually this is one of those 10% down on taxation, and 90% of it's paid through DCs or in our DC reserve. What does that reserve look like today? What's the status of it?
Go through the Carrie.
Thank you. The Director of Recreation and I met to review the recreation development charges. Based on the current DC study, that recreation is not a part of in this 5-year study because the DC balance was too high 3 years ago when the study was done. So currently, we're not collecting DCs for recreation. However, the DC balance related to recreation has decreased quite a bit since that time in an effort to manage, to fund some of these newer other recreational facilities that we've put in this year, in the past few years. So currently, the balance is about $500,000. It has been earmarked, although not specifically tied to a specific project, but it has been earmarked in the prior DC studies for arena replacement.
So we've taken arena replacement kind of off the rails. So we've got $500,000 in the bank on DCs, and we're looking at $13,000 in taxation in the 2018 budget to make this happen. So I would support a motion, but before I support that, I want to understand what we're saying. So option A will proceed for budget deliberation. Is that the motion? Then I would vote in favor of that motion. Thank you.
Further comments? Councillor LaRose.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We just heard from Blackline tonight, and they talked about shared services. They talked about a bunch of efficiencies, and they're going to be bringing that report forward. One of their efficiencies was not to have the same item here, 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 and here. So if we look around North Simcoe, if they already exist, why would we build one? That makes everybody else's worse and ours not funded and used to the level that it should be. So I would be in favor of not having this as a budget discussion. We haven't seen our service delivery model yet from Blackline. I don't understand the hurry.
Further comments?
We need to watch the dollars and cents people talk about every day. Here, Mr. Chang asked for a recorded vote on this item to defeat Councillor Lauder's option here of option A.
Further comments or concerns? So the motion is that we proceeded to budget, and it's moved by Councillor Lauder and seconded by His Worship, that we proceed to the item 2 budget discussion. So recorded vote is being asked.
Recorded vote as requested by Councillor Rawson, that Council proceed with option A as outlined within the staff report. Councillor Rawson.
Opposed.
Deputy Mayor Duveau.
In favor.
Councillor Saunders.
In favor?
Councillor Mayette.
Opposed?
Councillor LaRue.
In favor.
Councillor LaRose. Councillor Levy.
Opposed?
Councillor Lauder.
In favor?
Mayor Marshall.
In favor.
That motion is carried.
Thank you. Moving on to referrals to upcoming agenda. Staff referrals at the Recreation Community Service section endorse the following additional and existing referrals to upcoming agenda and staff. Future agenda items, tourism advertising online for future consideration, 2018 recreation assets, parks and facilities analysis, and 2017, then the third quarter. Cycling strategy, developing in cycling strategy by Councillor Lauder in first quarter of 2018. Karma Ecology Garden report agreement, new draft agreement and review of operations for fourth quarter of 2017. Pickleball, which we have just dealt with, and the ICE subsidy review, provide options for ensuring subsidies reached the residents of Penetanguishene, then fourth quarter 2017. Do we have any to add or delete? There being none, a mover. Mayor Marshall, seconder. Yes. Councillor Mayette, all in favor. Thank you. And that question period from media or press? Being none, back to you, Your Worship.
Thank you very much. We'll go to Planning and Community Development Services, and I'll turn the chair over to Councillor Levy, please.
Thank you very much, Mayor Marshall. We'll start with the consent agenda. Recommended action that the following consent agenda items, having been given due consideration, be received for information. The only one is the Downtown Business Improvement Committee meetings, approved Downtown Improvement Committee meetings, June 2017 minutes. Do I have a mover? Councillor Rawson, seconded. Councillor Louder. All those in favor? And carried. Thank you very much. Moving on to matters for consideration. Planning and Development 1746, re-site plan approval for 61 Thompson Road. Recommended action that the site plan approval be granted to the property at 61 Thompson Road West, subject to technical refinement by staff. PD 1759, re-site plan application 61 Thompson Road West final. Recommended action that a site-specific zone exception for the oh, no, I've moved on. Sorry, my computer's a little wonky, and, yeah, no, anyway. This is something we haven't seen for a while. This is the apartment building, three-story apartment building at 61 Thompson Road in Belil Heights, and with the Phase 1 being 18 apartments. I think I'll turn this over to the planner. Phase 2 being 24 apartments. And as I said, we haven't seen this for a while, so it's good news that this is alive again. And Andrea, can you give us a summary, a short summary, please?
Certainly. Thank you very much, Councillor Levy. We did receive the application by the owner of the property. It's been back and forth for staff, a couple times refining the location of the building, but you'll see from the drawings, it is a phased development where the first phase would include 18 apartment units for 1 or 2 bedroom units itself. The site plan demonstrates the building would be meet the zoning bylaw for location and be adjacent to the road, allowing easy pedestrian access. The parking area would be around the back, and thereby decreasing impacts to the adjacent low-density neighborhood. They've submitted the drawings and are looking for site plan approval with potential to build this year.
Thank you very much. Any questions for the planner? Go ahead, Councillor Louder.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My only concern is with respect to the future multi-use trail. And the concern is simply, I'm not sure if this land is their allocation and the other lot's going to have an allocation, but if this is a full trail, then potential future use of the trail, although there's no actual measurements of the trail on the diagram presented, I take a look at the parking lots, and the parking lots have got a measurement of 3.5 meters, well, I guess around 12 or so feet wide or whatever, and if this is to scale, then the future multi-use trail would be around 6 feet wide, which is not wide enough for a multi-use trail by any definition as far as I'm concerned. So if you can clarify that multi-use trail for us.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lauder. The multi-use trail is actually not to be built as part of this development and not on this property, so any references to it on the drawings are probably not appropriate or accurate. So it would be something that's a future development capital project, I believe, through Public Works.
Thank you. And I fully hoped that was going to be the answer, because the actual direction and whatnot of the trail would be not very likely in this case. So I appreciate that answer. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lauder. Does Council have any further questions on staff moving forward with this? Seeing none. Oh, mover, Councillor Lauder, seconder, Councillor Rawson. All those in favor? And carried. Thank you. Thank you very much. The next item. PD 1758. REZA 5, 2016, re Corbo Crescent and Jennings Drive, result of public meeting. Recommended action that a site-specific zone exception for the property at 24 Corbo Drive to permit a second dwelling unit in a semi-detached dwelling subject to reduced lot frontage and lot area be approved. This was the subject of a public meeting 2 weeks ago, and we had a lot of interest from the community. We had a petition, we had several letters outlining the area's disapproval of allowing secondary suites in duplexes in that area. And the reason this has come about, in part, two reasons why this has come to a head was, one building permit was issued in error for the duplex secondary suite, and we, of course, were looking at a secondary suite bylaw as part of our official plan update. So I'm actually considering the input from the public, the questions by council, the nature of that area. I'm quite pleased with staff's recommendation that we permit this one based on the fact that there is considerable parking opportunity for that one particular property at 24, and not permitting any of the other properties to have secondary suites that are duplexes. Did I get that right, Andrea? Okay, good. So, mover on that, Councillor Louder, seconder, Deputy Mayor Dubo, and questions, discussion. Councillor LaRose.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wonder why we're even looking at this. We talked about this before. We talked about all the problems that came up. We had a good group of people that live in that area, including people that own semis and singles. We didn't have one person that wanted it, and now all of a sudden we're going to say to the whole neighborhood, probably, no, you guys can't do that, but this one you can. That is like completely unfair.
Thank you, Councillor LaRose, and I would like Andrea to comment on that.
Thank you very much, Councillor Levy. Through you to Councillor LaRose. As Councillor Levy indicated, there was a building permit that was issued in error, and so we still have a non-compliant situation that the town would need to address at some point. So that could be done in one or two ways. Staff are recommending right now that we rezone for a site-specific amendment for that property to recognize that use on just that property itself. Should council not support that motion, then I would follow up with another report on how to bring the property into compliance with the bylaw.
I need one quick question myself for clarification. So is 24 Corbeau the property that was issued the building permit in error? Okay.
Yes, correct.
That wasn't clear to me. Councillor LaRose.
As soon as somebody else that, say, wanted one, if I wanted to go buy the duplex on 26, I'm going to be standing here in front of council saying, you gave it to buddy next door, why don't I get one?
My response to that would be, how do we tell them we let them build an apartment, and now, months later, telling them we were wrong, they can't have it, they spent all that money for nothing? You and I have been through this, where town staff have made an error, and we've always supported the resident. So. Councillor Rossin.
I'm seeing this the same way Councillor LaRose is seeing this. My question to the director: if we go with option 3, you state you're going to come back with a report. Do you have other tools available that can provide a further remedy to the residents in question, which is 24, other than us rezoning this tonight with your option 1? And I don't expect you to tell us the tools tonight, but if we go with option 3, can you come back with other options that can be evaluated and considered, or is this the only option? And I guess my further question would be, when was the building permit issued?
Thank you, Councillor Rossin. Through to the director.
Thank you very much, Councillor Levy. Through you to Councillor Rossin. The building permit was issued, I'll start with that one, it's easy, it was issued in March of 2015. In terms of option 3, are there options within that option, basically? I think I've identified that there's, if there's no changes made, that we still have to address and deal with the non-compliant situation for the building permit in error, and there would be options for how the municipality could deal with that. It's not included in this report, but it would be something that we would follow up with.
If I can follow
Okay,
up.
one more comment from Councillor Ross, and then on to Mayor Marshall.
Just my follow-up is, so if I'm just hearing you right, Andrea, option 3 provides you, through your staff and planning and tools available, that there are other options you can remedy the situation. And you'll subsequently come back to us with what those options look like. if I'm hearing you right.
Through you, yes, there would be other options. I potentially would note that those options are something that we would recommend be discussed in camera.
Thank you very much. Mayor Marshall?
So the other side of this coin is, if we turn this down, I take all the points Councillor Rawson and LaRose have articulated and weigh them carefully as I'm going to vote here tonight. But so the other side of this coin is, if we turn this down, and I'm this couple, I say, fine, then what about the other illegal apartments that are in that area? So legal non-conforming. So what happens if there's other apartments existing, right? And so what is our step there? So the opposite of this is we turn this down, and this person says, well, what about A, B, C? And I got the sense from some of the feedback we had with the residents a couple of weeks ago that there's other apartments in play in that area already. So what does it mean? It seems to me we're headed down a slippery slope here. So I'm with Councillor Ross, and so the slope goes one way going, what about all this? But then if we turn this couple down, then the slope's the other side going, well, what about the other ones that I know about that you now need to be informed about? So it's a slippery slope here. I'm not sure how to square the circle. Once Dan mentioned what he mentioned, my mind went, hang on, there's both sides of this pendulum.
By way of clarity, Mayor Marshall, are you referring to existing legal or existing illegal apartments?
Existing, either or, I guess, illegal, non-conforming, whatever the proper planning terms are.
Well,
So
if
ones
they're
we don't know
legal-
about.
Then they're illegal. Anything to add, Andrea?
I would just add with that, so we have heard that there are potential of other apartments in some of those semi-detached dwellings in the areas. We went through all of our records, and we've not found one that was ever been identified to the municipality, so we don't know of any. So any apartments that may be there are non-compliant with the zoning bylaw and not in conformity with the building code. So through this, I guess the owners of those properties should be aware of that matter now, so they understand and appreciate that they may have an issue future sale or disposal of that land.
Any further questions, comments? Councillor LaRose? LaRue?
Thank you, Madam Chair. In regards to this particular property, it's a little exceptional to the others that may be illegal apartments. This one was issued a permit. So it makes it altogether different than all of those others that are in there illegally. And, you know, it's not the first time that council has dealt with an issue specifically one-on-one. And so that to me is that clean it up, let it go, and then make sure that no other further ones are going to be permitted.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Oh, sorry, Councillor LaRose.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I understand a permit's been issued, we have to carry on down that road. What I would be looking for is more in the option 3 of what other way is there to do that without having to change the zoning and everything? Could we not do that so that it only goes to the life of that owner? What if somebody else buys it and wants to turn it back into a duplex, but it still has the new changes for it to be a triplex, right? I'm saying, why do we, as council, want to tie it to that property forever? Let's listen to the other options before we vote on this option, because there's probably a better way than this.
Well, I think we have to vote anyway. So you can feel free to defeat. Well, it's option, the recommendation is option 2, and I'm supporting option 2. And I have a mover and a seconder for option 2. So shall we carry on with? Yes, we shall. I'm the chair. Yes, we shall carry on. Feel free to defeat. Okay, I'm going to call for the vote, actually. All those in favor of supporting staff recommendation option 2? Option 2. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, opposed? And we're defeated. Yeah, that's fine.
No, option 2.
Yeah, well, now they're going to come back. So we'll get option, yeah. Sorry, Madam Clerk.
Just to clarify, yeah, with the motion being defeated, I would suggest that we move that other option for the, that there be no changes to the zoning bylaw with respect to second dwelling units within the semi-detached dwellings for the properties known as, And then if that, or else we refer back to staff, either or. I think if we just defeat it, the Director of Planning actually doesn't have direction.
Okay, right. I'm with you. So do I have a mover for that? No. To vote on option 3. Clarify, please.
Whichever option committee is looking to move. Option 3, so option 3 reads that there be no changes to the zoning bylaw with respect to second dwelling units within the semi-detached dwellings for the properties municipally known as 9 to 34 Corbeau Crescent inclusive and 10 to 27 Jennings Drive inclusive.
Great. So let's put this to bed now and see what magic staff can come back with. Do I have a mover? Nobody's moving? What? Okay, now I'm thoroughly... Sorry, Madam.
Yeah, we need to solve the problem. So you don't
But
need...
Councillor Rossen, we haven't voted to not permit second... Okay. Okay, we're done. Whoa. I guess I'll just take my toys and go away now. Turn this back to the mayor.
Still got referrals, Councillor Levy.
Could I just ask a question before we leave this particular item? And who will speak to the proponents of this property so that they know and understand what's just happened? Okay. Yeah, Andrea.
Okay, you're going to do the referrals for me?
Yes, Madam Chair. The referrals for upcoming agenda and staff for planning and community development. Before I actually read them, are there any changes, additions, deletions to be discussed? Any suggestions? Seeing none, referrals. That Planning and Community Development Services section endorse the following additional and existing referrals to upcoming agendas and staff. Developmental charges, CIP, targeted incentives and opportunities, due fourth quarter 2017. Secondary suite report, due fourth quarter 2017. And backyard chickens, due first quarter 2018. Do I have a mover? Councillor Rawson, and a second. Councillor LaRue. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Perfect. Thank you very much. Questions from the media and public? Hearing none, I'll pass back to you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, and I'll look for a mover and seconder to adjourn. Councillor Rawson, Councillor Levy, and all in favor? We are adjourned at 8:55 p.m. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Good night.